The Patrol offers 170 and 160 mil of front and rear travel respectively, and a jaw-droppingly slack 64-degree head angle. Those numbers don't usually generate words like manageable, poppy, or agile on our test forms, but they did with the Patrol. It seemed totally impartial to the fact there was a chairlift nearby. It rides like a trail bike, with a gigantic margin of error.
I was super surprised by the Patrol. It's not a bike that I would typically like. I don't generally like super long bikes. I generally don't like really slack bikes. And I don't really like bikes that have little wheels, generally speaking, even though this is a little wheel Bible that we're doing here. But I got on it and it felt like the most normal bike to me out of the entire fleet. It felt less cumbersome than anything else. It didn't take any like getting used to for me.
It did feel like a really maneuverable bike. I was kind of surprised at how slack of a bike it was, considering for me it seemed like climbing this bike in kind of a slower speed, chunkier, a little bit steeper uphill single track we had for climbing. You could put this bike where you wanted it to go. With the shock open, it climbed well. With the shock kind of in climb mode, it climbed great, but it felt surprisingly maneuverable. And it's a 64-degree head tube angle. That is not normally what you think of when you think of maneuverable bike.
And it has increased trail with the reduced offset fork, which should effectively make it feel like an even slacker head tube angle.
Yeah.
But what it does is it brings the front wheel like physically closer to you, so it's not super far away. So I think that's something that helps. And when you bring the seat angle really steep the way it is, that's
over
what I think
76
brings
degrees.
you.
Yeah,
and that's what brings you over the front of the bike, which mitigates the negative effect of having something very slack like this is. And it climbed so much better than I thought it would.
I did feel like that slack head angle fought me a little bit. I mean, and it wasn't like I was thinking about it. I wasn't going into it like thinking about SBG, transitions kind of named for their short offset fork and slack angle thing. I mean, I was blinded by fatigue and humidity, so that might have been part of it. But it's there. I think that you can't necessarily say that, oh, it rides like any other bike, but only with the advantages.
Yeah,
I mean, there's some disadvantages.
This is like a thoroughbred enduro race machine.
You'd never mistake the Patrol for a true all-rounder trail bike. It definitely prefers the downs, but it was so normal feeling that at times it felt like it was in a different category than the other bikes. It's not the plushest bike in the bunch, but the Patrol remained composed in the rough stuff and had by far the most progressive poppy rear suspension.
I've never done this before on a motorcycle, but I felt like in motocross racing when they're just flying over the whoops and the bike is just like bam, 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 bam over the whoops. That's how I felt this bike was. It wasn't like just soaking everything up like a Baja truck, but it remained composed during that whole time. I was like looking at the where I wanted to go and I knew I could get there.
And that didn't happen to me right away like it did on the YT Capra and the Canyon Torque and like all these other enduro bikes. You get on them and they feel like enduro bikes and they ride like enduro bikes. This one you're like, is this bike even, we kind of had this conversation, does this bike even really belong in this test? Because not only is it 160, it's on the shorter end of the rear travel, but it also is a super progressive 160.
Yeah.
And transition tends to suggest deeper sags.
Up to 35% sag, actually.
Yeah. And I ran it kind of around there, 33% or so, and like it started to feel natural once I got to know the course and got to know the bike.
But it didn't feel like overgunned, which I felt on some other bikes. I felt like they were harder to manage, and this one didn't feel that way to me. But like we're riding some pretty rowdy East Coast tech. I feel like the boys at Transition are, Bellingham's not the rowdiest. It's steep and there's a lot, and the Transition boys like to jump. And I feel like this is really a jumper's bike too, because of that progression.
One thing that's crazy is you can be going really fast, hitting bumps, feeling a little jostled, but you can just kind of dip into that end stroke and just pop the bike wherever you want to go. If you want to change your line, it's kind of a swift, deft movement, and all of a sudden you're on a different line.
A little reset button.
It's kind of like a little boost button.
Yeah.
You just kind of dip into it and you can pop yourself wherever you want to go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this bike really played to what I like about this category of bike, is just that you have this really forgiving geometry, and it can kind of get you out of trouble if you want to get it into trouble. But more than that, it likes to play. And there's a really, really rad jump line out here in Killington. You can get kind of stylish and comfortable with this bike because it's predictable. Like, it has the amount of travel that you're not going to get lost in, and it really allows you to do really what you want to with it.
Yeah, it's not going to over compress on the lip and get you all wonky off of it. It's going to pop you off and shoot you in the right direction.
In terms of kind of components, overall value, you know, this isn't a consumer direct bike, so compared to other dealer type bikes, what would you say?
I was pretty impressed. And not just like for straight linear value, like what you get for your dollar, but how smartly spec'd it is.
Yeah.
So it's $6,000, and it's got a HSC LSC fork, but they didn't like do it on the Kashima. It's the performance fork.
Yeah.
I mean, it's,
Yeah, you
Which
get
is exactly
all
the
the
same
benefit
except-
without, you know,
Yeah.
paying the extra price. A lot of adjustability.
170 mil dropper.
Yeah, definitely nice there. Smart touch. And this is a bike that has a ton of standover too. So
Yeah.
not only do you use that dropper, but you can really lean over it, kind of corner this bike without it getting in the way.
Yeah. And the bike likes to go fast, and shutting down that speed are some really strong code brakes. which
Another nice touch.
They're
Yeah.
consistent, they have tons of modulation, and I think that's a really good addition.
The Patrol is the most well-rounded, everyday rideable bike in the fleet. If you want something ground-hugging and super squish, it might not be what you're looking for. But no matter how hard you send it, it will be within the bike's margins, error or not. There's plenty more senders in this test at bikemag.com, and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss any of them.